Hi, I'm Alexis,
And I'm Kim.
and this is the Whatcha Watchin podcast. And today we are going to talk about Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, the upcoming MCU offerings slash products, and movies we're excited about for the future. So let's get into it here. Kim, I think we both liked Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Um, how do you feel that this kind of how do you feel this fits into the current MCU that we've seen so far? And is this a good place to bail on the MCU if you're ready for a break?
I think so. And I've heard a lot of people say this as well. This feels like a transition from Marvel as it was. James Gunn came in I think the first one was 2014. This was one of the first experiments Marvel made. Prior to this, we had the A-list, the top of the top, Iron Man, Thor, the ones even non-comic people liked. Guardians, that was one of the first times where they were like, "Oh, this is a slightly more niche offering." I'm not a huge comic book reader. I did not know the Guardians of the Galaxy before James Gunn took them over. He came in, it was so clear. It was maybe 5 years into the MCU or something like that. And he defined that franchise really until now. The look, the humor, the tone. But now he's moving to DC. Not many people are surprised by this. Marvel's clearly going in a different direction. We see that with the TV shows, we see that with the films. And this is that last hearkening gloriousness of Marvel as it was.
Totally agree. Yeah, I think Marvel used to feel like there was a distinction between movies. They didn't all feel the same. And even though they had the same sort of characters in them, and a lot of them like they needed to end with kind of something a little open, we needed to kind of keep the franchise going. It felt like there was a little bit more of a distinct style to Marvel movies in the past,
Mm-hmm.
whereas now I feel like there is kind of a generic Marvel formula that's starting to become more obvious. So when you get something like Guardians, and it does feel like it was a movie made by a person instead of by a focus group. Um, it really does kind of make you miss those movies of the past where it felt like, oh wow, this is like a director's vision,
Mm-hmm.
or even within, the confines of the strict MCU, you were able to have that before, and particularly with Guardians, because I think James Gunn does have such a sort of style. And I think this
Definitely.
was one where it's so bittersweet because like, I love that it exists. I love that we finally get something in the MCU that I really enjoy, because I feel like I've just been so burned out on these movies that it was like to come in here and have something where there's emotion and where there's humor, and like it looks visually way more interesting than a lot of the stuff we've gotten recently. Um and then to know that, well, James Gunn's gone and we'll probably just go back to the factory formula after this. It was like, oh man. But I think that does make it where a lot of people, I think, that are not super MCU people
Mm-hmm.
probably were on board with the MCU because of Guardians, or they're like, I
Mm-hmm.
don't watch all the MCU movies, but I like those Guardians movies. And I think
Right.
this is a good marker for that sort of concluded. I think this is a good place to bail if you're feeling burned out on Marvel. I think probably you could probably conclude here.
In the old days, they were more stylistically geared. They were able to bring in filmmakers with bigger voices, bigger visions. James Gunn brings a very distinct style to what he does. People might grill me. I'm gonna use the word auteur. It's his films are recognizable. He has brought that style to each one. He's a bit persona non grata now, but Joss Whedon was the same way on the Avengers films. You can recognize a Joss Whedon product. What are we doing now? We're moving towards I loved most of the Ant-Man movies. Peyton Reed is a bit more of a journeyman type of guy. This is moving into a producer's vision. This is like, it's turning into James Bond at this point. It's turning into a producer defined franchise as opposed to being able to work with a director with a distinct vision. A la the Eternals and Chloe Zhao not working. So they need the producers need control. They need to define the course of this, and it's becoming factory processed. In those early days it was refreshing because each of these films had a distinct world, but it was a little mind-blowing in that there was always one little thing that connected. Even if nothing else, Coulson would pop in for a couple minutes and be like, oh, he was in the other film, I see what you guys are doing there. But now they're hitting you in the face with everything. They're like, oh, we've spent years putting all of this together. Look at the product of our work. When it used to be more subtle, more interesting, you'd wait for those events. So
Yeah.
it's frustrating.
Yeah, I think each movie used to be able to stand on its own a lot more. And I think
100%.
yeah, and that's part of why they were able to build up the franchise, was because you could just enjoy the movie, but it would leave you wanting more, where you were like, "Oh, I wanna see the next one," or "I wanna see these characters come back," or something. And now it's starting to feel like, when there's like a TV show where they build up to a cliffhanger right like 2 minutes before the end of the episode, and it's so transparent that you're like, "I get it, you want me to watch the next episode." But it's like, it's not a satisfying conclusion. You don't really have an ending to each episode because you're just trying to propel me to make it through to episode 10 or something. That's kind of how this is starting to feel, where the stakes of everything are starting to feel really low, because that no individual movie is allowed to really have a conclusion. And I think that's also part of why this Guardians movie is so satisfying, is because it does feel like there's a conclusion. I mean, we are able to kind of, like, not as much as obviously we would like, but I think as far as current Marvel movies go, this has more of a finality to it at the end than I think a lot of them do. And even in terms of post-credit scenes and everything, it doesn't necessarily just feel like we're introducing a character for the next chapter. This is sort of, if this were to end tomorrow and we never saw these characters again, we'd be like, oh, okay. And they went on to do this and this and this. And I feel okay about that.
See, I
Yeah.
was waiting because a few of those actors, Dave Bautista, Zoe Saldana in particular, have basically said screw off to Marvel. They're done. They're not coming back. They're glad to be done. That Chris Pratt, I bet if there's, I mean, not spoiling any post-credit sequences, but if there's a dump truck full of money, I bet he'll be back. But with the way that ending, it still felt like to me a dump truck of money would bring any one of these people back.
Certainly. Yeah. I mean, I think that to me was almost like the safety net, where they ended it and they went, okay, and this could be the conclusion of this. But in like 5 years, if we decide to give Batista $1 bajillion to come back, we could probably get him back. And like, if we decide to give Zoe Saldana a ton of money, we could probably get her back. So I get the sense that it's kind of, it's like, well, here's your conclusion. You don't have to come back, but we're also leaving the door open because we have all the money in the world. And if we want to do something with this character moving forward, we will get you back.
Because even on this one, you can feel, at least for me, I
Mhm.
know I was very much more of the cynic coming out of it than a lot of other people. You could feel the Disney hands on that, which could very well be why James Gunn is now the hands over on DC. But I don't have a source on this, but I recall seeing somewhere articles, Gunn saying he wanted to kill Gamora after the second one. He wanted to get rid of that character, and Disney would not let him do it. It feels like a last grasp of, like you said, those old days with the stakes where we could make it work, but then you can feel them fighting against it.
Yeah, absolutely. This movie was so interesting in that I was really curious about like which battles he was able to win, and kind of I would love to know how that all was able to take place, because there are things in this. I mean,
Same.
even the fact that like it has the first F-bomb in the MCU, like all these different things where it's like, how how was he able to make that work? And the only thing I can think is like he's got the juice. He's built up enough. This is such a beloved part of the franchise. And then also he's able to be like, well, I don't really care because I'm leaving. So whatever. Like it's almost like a senior year kind of like, it's the week after finals. I don't give a shit. I'm out of here. So I think that to me was really strong. And that I think like I saw that a little bit in Multiverse of Madness, where you could see the Sam Raimi stuff like trying to come through, but there was that just sort of hand of Disney kind of pushing that down. But when you did get those little moments where it was like, oh, this is actual Sam Raimi stuff, it was like, this is really good. But it's always kind of a vision pushing against the corporate kind of oversight of it all.
Had they let Sam Raimi in there 4 years ago, that could have been a completely different film when they actually let them spread their wings. Because
Yeah.
again, another auteur with a
Mhm.
distinct style whose film you can recognize.
Totally.
I mean, in Guardians and Guardians 3, we see the first, I would say this is the first full on example of Gunn's un unrestrained voice.
Mhm.
He's always been edgy. He's been, Super was not a clean cut movie. The man, if you Google PG porn on YouTube, that is James Gunn. He's trauma. He comes from a very interesting sect of films, and you can see this all over Guardians. This is one of the first times where it's like, oh, this, I think I said this is trauma meets Marvel. We haven't seen this before, and you can imagine the script. This is a hard script in places, and a script that's not doesn't necessarily fit in the Marvel fold as it is now. I could only imagine the nerves going through those producers' offices.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the sort of faith that they had for him to be able to do this really speaks to how like powerful he is within, being able to tell a good story and how much audiences love him. Because there are things in this, like I said in my review, like this is going to traumatize kids so much. And I think it's funny how this is a Marvel movie, which have all been previously super accessible for kids. And this is one that like every parent that I know that has seen this movie is like, well, yeah, I didn't take my kids to it. Like, yeah, I wouldn't take my kids to this. I went and saw it. And it's because like we're getting sort of an adult version of a Marvel movie. We're getting something a little more grown up, a little more mature. And I think that's really that's a sort of a new thing because everything has been geared to be as broad as possible. And then suddenly we have something that's like, no, don't bring like a 7-year-old to this.
No,
This
yeah,
is very much something that if you bring a small child to this, they will have nightmares and
there
be
will
totally
be
freaked
nightmares.
out forever.
My my 30-year-old sister was freaked out by this film. It's a hard one.
For sure. Every critic I've seen has been like, look, if you're really bothered by animal torture, this movie's going to really mess you up. And like, even myself, like when I was watching it, I just kept trying to be like, they're pixels, they're not real. But you do have to kind of tell yourself that in a way that I was like, I've never had in a Marvel movie where I have to remind myself to not emotionally invest in this very much, because usually for Marvel, I'm trying to force myself to emotionally invest in it. So that I think was part of why I loved it so much. Was I was like, I'm feeling emotions, I'm getting choked up, I'm really caring about things, and it just feels like it's been so long since that happened in a Marvel movie.
So I was doing the same thing. I was watching Rocket's storyline and going, oh, we know I think I said to my sister at one point, I said, we know what's going to happen with these characters. They
Totally.
haven't been in any other film and he has a chip on his shoulder. Do not get invested. This is not going to end well.
Absolutely. Yeah, totally. It's where you're like, you're watching it and as an adult and as a person who understands storytelling, you're like, oh, I know exactly the sort of emotional manipulation you're doing here. But then you're like, I'm not gonna fall for it. I'm not gonna like get emotionally invested in these characters. And then like 5 minutes in, you're like, oh my God. Yeah. So I
Rocket,
think that
no.
yeah, and that's a huge accomplishment. Like we can all see the manipulation happening, but yet you still sort of fall for it, and that's incredible to me. I haven't felt that way. They did that to me like this in contrast with Love and Thunder, to me is like the biggest distinction, where Love and Thunder attempted to do a lot of this like emotional stuff with like the Jane has cancer storyline, and they try to do a lot to make you feel emotionally invested, but then it's constantly undercut with a joke, and a lot of the jokes just get really annoying, and it just becomes where you lose the emotional side and you lose the humor side, and it just is a mess. And this was such a perfect example of the opposite of that, where you get the emotional side, you get the humor side. It was like this was what Love and Thunder was trying to accomplish. And this actually did it in a way that was really satisfying. And it's just I'm gonna miss this in the MCU.
I usually react very strongly against when I know I'm being manipulated. That's one thing that will quickly turn me off to a movie. Yep,
Mhm.
yeah, you mentioned Love and Thunder. As the most recent, A Star Is Born. There are points where I'm like, "Oh, screw you, movie! I know exactly what you're trying to do." The Fablemans. It's like, no, stop it. Stop it. And here you can see it, but at the same, yeah, I got pulled right into it. And to me, that's Gunn's superiority as a filmmaker and a storyteller.
Absolutely. Yeah, the fact that can be accomplished really says something for the skill of him as a filmmaker and this film in general in terms of execution and everything as well. So, do you think, I mean, obviously we probably have to see all the rest of the MCU movies because we're critics and this is part of it. But if you weren't a critic, would you be checked out of the MCU at this point? Would this be sort of a curtain call? Thank you, good night. We're done with the MCU here. Or do you think you would keep going?
I think these have moved past. Before I was a critic, I went to see all of these. I tend to get very caught up in the event nature of it. They're not an event
Mhm,
anymore. I think it has reached the point where you can pick and choose.
mhm.
I won't say that I won't go see all of them, but if I knew I didn't have to write about it, I might take it a little easier and there might be some I would skip. I can already admit I'm not checking out all of the TV series. I did not finish Loki season 1. I've heard everybody loved it. I was not pulled in. It's more hit and miss now than
Mhm.
it used to be.
Definitely, definitely. Yeah, I'm with you. I think I have basically checked out of the TV stuff. I think I there was the first like 3 TV shows, I was like, "Yes, I'm on board." And then I think I just and that was a lot of that was pandemic stuff with like, well, they couldn't really end it this way or they had to change this or whatever, and I get that. Um, but yeah, it's almost like, it's been kind of polluted in a way where the brand now, it's just there's so much stuff and it's all of not great quality anymore. And I'm with you, the event nature of a Marvel product feels like it's kind of lost. It used to be like when there was an Avengers movie coming out, it was like, "Oh, I'm so excited. In like a year, we're gonna get a new Avengers movie and it's gonna be so amazing." And now it's kind of like, yeah, well, every couple months we get a new Marvel thing
Yeah.
and they're all sort of fine. So I agree. I think there isn't really that kind of like majestic big, event shared experience, almost like the water cooler kind of
Mhm.
conversation where everybody just sort of sees these and it's fine and whatever, but it's kind of people see them at different times and people wait for Disney Plus or whatever.
Yeah.
It's become something where I will probably watch these MCU movies, but unless I'm reviewing them, it will probably be something that I wait for Disney Plus because I don't necessarily think it's like a go to a theater type of thing anymore.
Well, I think they've seen a hit from the pandemic, but then also the midnight screening experience started disappearing long before that. I mean, after The Dark Knight probably is when we started seeing that really
True.
start to move away. And that's where, and maybe it was we were both in our 20s at the time. But yeah, if you cared about it, you were there at the midnight screening. You were there with a crowd of other people who were passionate in that theatrical experience that you could lap up and talk about it the next day because people cared.
Mhm.
And now, yeah, I didn't see Love and Thunder until it hit Disney Plus. And to me, the TV shows, they're having a heck of a time supporting those over 6, even 8 episodes.
Yeah.
She-Hulk went like, She-Hulk went like this until the last episode, which was great. And it's like, it
Yeah.
it's not sustainable, the
Yeah.
pace they're trying to hold it at, especially as the industry changes and the market changes around it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think it's interesting to think about perhaps we'll see the end of the MCU, because it just feels like it's a never-ending thing that will go on until the heat death of the universe. But I think, and it probably won't ever just fully end for a long time, but I think we'll
It'll
start to
cease being
see.
sustainable, I think.
Yeah. We'll start to see the kind of production get a lot smaller, and as it starts to become
TV.
less profitable, it'll become where now everything's a TV show, and now everything's in front of a green screen, and now everything's whatever. And this Guardians does feel like the end of the golden age of the
Hmm.
MCU.
Agreed.
Um so it'll be very interesting to see where that goes.
When they're running out of people to pull into it. I mean, I'm excited for Secret Wars on television, and that, Olivia Colman, Ben Mendelsohn, I'd watch Read the Phone Book. They're still getting some good casts, but now they're throwing in what movie are we going to see Harry Styles in? Brent Gold, is it Brent Goldstein from
Yeah.
from Ted Lasso? They're all these. It's like, oh, so and so plays such. When are we
Yeah,
ever going to see these people again?
they did a lot of sort of teases for things that I don't think we'll actually see, especially like with the writer strike and with all these other things. I think, even like Blade, Blade's been delayed again because of the writer strike. And I mean, that movie's already been delayed like 15 times, where I'm like, are we ever going to see Blade? I don't think we're ever going to see Blade. So I think there's a lot of these upcoming things on the slate that they're like, and this one, and this. And it's very, you planned this when this was at the height of its power, and now it's sort of diminishing returns. And I think we're going to see a lot of these things maybe not actually come to fruition. So the slate just, I don't know, nothing really excites me that much. Like I want to be excited for the Marvels because I think like I like the actresses that are in it, but
Hmm.
I also am kind of like I just don't care about this that much. Like there's so much where it's like I can't make myself care, especially after something like Guardians. I feel like I want to go out on a high note. I want to be like, "Hey, remember when I was emotionally invested in this and I cared about this?" I don't want to go back to where I was
Well,
before.
and I hate to be that guy, but a movie like The Marvels, it's exhausting when you think about it because we've got a woman of color behind the camera. We've got, women leading. We've got women of color. YouTube is going to
Oh
make that
God.
film
I can see the
exhausting.
thumbnails now.
Yeah, it's the fans ruin these movies
Yeah.
at
Which I
some
think is the
level.
same thing that happened with Star Wars.
Yeah,
Like, Star Wars it also started to not feel like an event anymore. And it did kind of pivot to being TV
that's
heavy.
dead. Yeah, the
Yeah.
event is
And it just
dead.
became the kind of thing I remember seeing Force Awakens in theaters and being like, we're getting new Star Wars. This is the most amazing experience. We get to go to a movie theater and get a brand new official Star Wars movie, and being so excited for that. And then the same with The Last Jedi, where it was like, oh my God, like we're going to see the second part of this new Star Wars thing. And then it was like, just like The Last Jedi happened, and it was the equivalent of like that Community meme with Donald Glover
Mhm.
entering and everything's on fire. It's like it was like that was the experience
It's
of
such a good
going to see that.
movie too.
Exactly. Like a movie that I liked, and then you go like, I wonder what people thought of this online, and it's just like like
I got so
horrifying.
much hate for
And then
my
you're just like,
review.
oh, like you just want to kind of slowly back away and be like, okay. And I think that the fan backlash to that movie just made a lot of people go, okay, I'm out. I don't care. I don't want to be invested in this anymore because people freak out if it's good, people freak out if it's bad. And it's like I can't. I don't want the drama of Star Wars.
A woman touching my things is too much for some of this community. Heck, Doctor Who.
Oh God,
Doctor Who,
yes.
a woman took over Doctor Who and suddenly it's the worst thing ever.
And that's the thing. It's
This
like it's
community still needs work.
yes. It's like, I think it's great that we're like nerd culture and these spaces are finally, becoming popular. But it's also like, ugh, there's a lot of behavior within this sort of group of fans that you're like, okay, can everybody just calm
There's
down a little bit?
there's old nerd and new nerd, I think, are
Totally.
doing battle right now.
Totally. Yes, absolutely. And then you got like, 48-year-old men like going on a rant about Rose Tico, and you're just like, okay, I don't want to care about this anymore. I'm done with Star Wars.
They were bullied in high school for liking this. Now that it's popular and everybody's involved, that can't handle it.
Yeah, they're like, I was bullied for liking this, and now I'm going to bully other people for liking it because it's slightly different than what I liked before. In addition to the slate of MCU movies that we're kind of lukewarm on, there's a lot of upcoming stuff that we actually are really excited to see. I know we're both really looking forward to two movies that could not be more different from each other, Barbie and
Coming out the same
Oppenheimer.
day.
That's the double feature I want. I want to go see Oppenheimer, I want to go see Barbie, and I want to just have my brain try to process that transition.
Imagine that double feature. I was initially very much team Oppenheimer on that. I worry that Christopher Nolan might be believing his own hype a little bit, but he's one I've been there since the beginning. I will go see anything he touches. Most people who read my criticism will know I'm always there for a good period drama, especially if it's 40s and 50s. That cast speaks for itself. I was a little less ready for Barbie. Greta Gerwig I usually like, but like her Little Women I really did not like. So I was like, but then that trailer pulled me in
The trailer
so
is
hard.
so good. Like every
Brilliantly
piece
done.
of marketing they have released for that Barbie movie is just perfect. It's like every single thing they've done for it has made me so excited to see it. And I'm just hoping that it's able to live up to the incredible marketing that they've done.
The beat you off joke that gave me life.
So good. Yeah, I'm like so excited when he pulls out the rollerblades or whatever. Like
I go
tremendous.
nowhere without them.
I feel like it's one of those things, it's milking nostalgia, but in like it's very self-aware of that. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that it's doing that in a really humorous way. We talk so much about things that are just kind of like, here's the thing you recognize from your childhood. And the Barbie movie is filled with stuff like that. But it's also the kind of thing where I'm okay with it because they know what they're doing and that's the
Mm-hmm.
joke. So it's fine. And yeah, that is, I think I am really excited for Oppenheimer, but I'm with you on sometimes I feel like Christopher Nolan can get a little too in love with his own filmmaking.
Yep.
So I'm very optimistic about Oppenheimer, but I'm also a little like, okay, I hope it's really good. It seems like it's going to be really good, but it could be like Nolan cranked up to 11, and I don't know if that's going to be a great thing. Barbie, I'm like 100% on board. I'm just like, yep,
Mm-hmm.
I will be there. Like, if we get a screening invite for it, I will be so thrilled because that's one that I want to review. I'll probably end up watching it multiple times just based on the marketing. It looks like it's going to be great. So Barbie is probably my most anticipated one out of that sort of
Mm-hmm.
upcoming crop.
Barbie, I am given a little bit of hope that, Greta Gerwig's going to bring something extra to it as well. I
Yeah,
bet we're seeing in the trailer maybe the first half. She's going to do something weird. You don't get a filmmaker like Greta Gerwig in there for just a superficial level Mattel cross promotion. There's got to be
totally.
something cool there, which definitely gets me excited. I
Mhm.
still have to say Oppenheimer's probably my most anticipated, but Barbie's pretty darn close behind.
For sure. And then one that I think we both are now really looking forward to is the Meg 2, which again, no one should be looking forward to this. It's dumb. We shouldn't necessarily even be saying like, yes, let's keep making sure that movies like this get made. But I loved the Meg 1 because it was the
Yes.
exact kind of stupid that I love the most. It was just that perfect like schlock, just like CG action. Jason Statham just like, fighting a ginormous shark, and like it's the CG, like every element of it shouldn't work and technically doesn't really work. But yet
Mhm.
when put together, It makes the exact type of nonsense that I am most on board for.
Schlock, when they lean into it, you have to
Yes.
play it right. You have to lean into it right. You have to acknowledge you have to know what you're doing. You have to know what you're going for. And when you can do that, it is masterful. This is
Yes.
coming from someone who's watched Corman's filmography from start to finish. I love schlock. I have watched so much 50s schlock. And this trailer was brilliant.
Yes.
From the Barracuda sound
Yes.
cue, which made me laugh throughout. Jason Statham holding the megalodon off by his feet. I mean,
Incredible.
thank you, movie.
I'm so excited for it. Like with that shot of him holding it like with his leg, I was like, okay, if I wasn't on board before, I am 100% sold on this at this point. Like it's so stupid and it's so exactly what I want. And then another sort of big dumb fun thing that we're going to go see that I think we're both very excited about is we're going to go see Fast 10. And this will be
Yes.
really exciting because neither of us have ever seen a Fast and the Furious movie prior to this. So our first entry to the Fast franchise will be the 10th movie. And I think it's going to be really fun to see what we take away from this, what we've gained through cultural osmosis to be able to understand this story, and what parts of it were
Family.
like, this is utter nonsense, but that's okay because I think I can fill in the blanks.
I have to say, I've seen one of the spinoffs. I've seen Hobbs and Shaw, but
Okay.
that was literally it. But no, family. It's about family, right?
I know Vin Diesel. I know family. I know at one point I think cars are in space now. Um,
Gravity doesn't matter anymore.
yeah, gravity doesn't matter. I know there was a big sort of dick measuring contest between The Rock and Vin Diesel that's been very tense on social media and other places.
Yeah.
So that's pretty entertaining to me. I know like I know so much stuff surrounding these movies that I'm going to be really excited to see it. Plus Jason Momoa's in it. So I mean, if we're upping the ridiculous level, I feel like Jason Momoa is a perfect person to bring in. If we're like, could we make this more ridiculous? It's like call Jason Momoa. So
Speaking of actors who can play into the ridiculousness, Jason Momoa, they love the guy. He brings that winking delivery, which it's same in every film, I'm concerned, but he's a joy to watch in whatever he does. He doesn't need to bring intelligence to it. He doesn't need to bring depth. He just shows up, tosses that hair, and he's good. He's here.
exactly. Jason Momoa can just come in, have those eyebrows, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
on board for the character. So I cannot wait to see what level of insane ridiculousness this movie is. And I really cannot wait. I think the idea of jumping into a franchise at the 10th movie, I'm
Yeah.
really excited for this, just sort of as an experiment.
So forgive us for our reviews as we watch it going, well, this makes no sense.
We're going to talk about it on the pod and we'll just be like, okay, here's what I think the story was previous to this. Like, here's what I think is the previously on Fast and the Furious up to this point. I want something that ramps up exponentially into full ridiculousness, and it seems like the Fast franchise might be just that thing. To where I'm
It
like,
better get there.
I think I could get really into this. When we talk about
That's what I'm
schlock
wanting.
and we talk about like big dumb explosion filled things that we're interested in, I think this could really like once we see Fast 10, I'm excited to try all the rest because I feel like this could be
Yes.
the exact kind of popcorn thing that I would love. Yeah, I think we will both have a very fun time watching Fast 10. So be sure to come back and join us for our review of that, which will be the next one on here. And you'll hear our theories and our sort of well, I think we're going to analyze it almost like a specimen in a lab.
Yes. Yeah.
So I'm
Get
excited for that.
get those film critic brains onto it, which doesn't mean we're going to hate it. Not
Exactly.
all critics
We
can,
appreciate things when they are what they aim to be. And I feel like this is a franchise where I think it tends to just be exactly what it says on the box. So I'm really looking forward to that. Well, Yeah, stay tuned for our fast review, and thank you for watching or listening, and be sure to like, comment, subscribe, follow, all of the stuff on social and everything, and we will catch you in the next one.